Welcome to Crossroads, a show by the Epic Times that gives you insights beyond the headlines. Now, as always, don't forget to hit the like button. It helps get the show out to a lot more people. Now, look, charges from a recent raid by ICE suggest something interesting. A new type of criminal charge is being used against illegal immigrants working in the United States, and this is a big deal. Individuals are being charged with, quote, aggravated identity theft. Which suggests the administration is now enforcing a crime that is commonly committed by illegal immigrant workers. This is ICE on this. It says U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, their Homeland Security Investigations special agents, in collaboration with federal, state, and local law enforcement partners, executed a federal search warrant at Buckeye Fire Equipment Company June 25th as part of an active, ongoing criminal investigation. It says this operation specifically focused on serious allegations of aggravated identity theft and potential federal crimes. As a result, it says, of the initial investigation, 30 people were arrested on site. It said this operation underscores HSI's unwavering commitment to protecting the integrity of our nation's financial and identification systems. Identity fraud is not a victimless crime. It fuels a range of criminal activity and puts innocent people at risk, said HSI Charlotte Special Agent in Charge Cardell T. Moran, who also oversees, it says, North and South Carolina. And they say, quote, working alongside our law enforcement partners, HSI will continue to pursue those who exploit these systems for personal gain and hold them accountable under federal law. Now, they also posted a video of this whole thing. It's been interesting watching the new face of law enforcement. It's like cops, but without the reporter there. And in the post, ICE announced that, quote, 28 illegal aliens arrested in North Carolina worksite enforcement operation, aggravated identity theft and other federal crimes suspected, 2 other subjects arrested on state charges, and numerous documents seized in this ongoing investigation. Now, like my personal take, this is significant because in order to get certain jobs, illegal immigrants often use stolen social security numbers or stolen identities. It's a business. There's a massive market for it. And this crime, which it is, this crime has been mostly ignored. You don't really see people charged with that. When they arrest an illegal immigrant, if they're working illegally, if they're at a construction site, you don't normally see them getting charged with crimes for stealing somebody's social security number. But it's huge. A lot of them do it. It's the way it works. In fact, even if you go to like New Jersey, they have shops set up where people just go there, and it's like a one-stop shop where you get your stolen ID and then you get other like registration for social services. This has been allowed for a long time. This has been tolerated for a long time, and it's never really been treated as a crime until now. It seems that a shift is taking place. They're now treating that as an actual crime, something that they used to turn a blind eye to. If they do this, it means that every person illegally working in the United States who has stolen an identity, which is a lot of them, they risk committing a very serious crime now. Now, on a related point, a federal judge has yet again blocked President Donald Trump. You thought it was over, it's not. And the case, this could actually be a test of just how broad the recent Supreme Court ruling is, because you might remember the U.S. Supreme Court voted 6-3 in an opinion that nationwide injunctions are not legal. They can only be done within a state. The one exception to that is if it's a class action lawsuit. You now have judges, yet again, blocking President Trump. Epic Times said this: a federal judge on Wednesday ruled against a Trump administration policy that blocks foreign nationals who cross the U.S.-Mexico border from seeking asylum, coming as the White House has touted what it says are historically low border crossings in recent weeks. It says in an order released Wednesday, U.S. Judge Randolph Moss found that the Trump administration overstepped its authority and bypassed immigration law and said, quote, the president cannot adopt an alternative immigration system which supplants the statutes that Congress has enacted, Moss wrote in the order, calling into question the changes to the immigration system that happened under previous administrations, but it's a whole other topic. Now, interestingly, it doesn't just stop there. A judge also blocked Trump's move to revoke temporary protection status for Haitians who came here under TPS. And Epoch Times reported a federal judge on July 1st blocked the Department of Homeland Security from ending temporary protection status for hundreds of thousands of Haitian immigrants before the program's scheduled expiration date. It notes that Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem reversed the decision in February. This was, again, Biden-era thing. She reversed it, saying the current conditions in Haiti no longer warranted the designation. And notes that Noem initially said Haiti's TPS designation would end in August, but later revised the expiration date to September 2nd. Not too far off, regardless. But it notes that a 23-page order issued July 1st, U.S. District Judge Brian Cogan ruled the move was unlawful, stating that Noem lacks either statutory or inherent authority to partially vacate a country's TPS designation. So what's going on here? Well, these are not technically nationwide injunctions. They are rulings on cases, again, determining by the judge, rulings on cases that bring an end to nationwide policies. But this is different from, for example, putting an injunction in place while the case is still going through. Now, on that point, what's going to happen from here? Almost without a doubt, if they haven't already started already, the Trump administration is, of course, going to appeal. It's going to go to the appeals court. Very likely, the judge's order is going to be put on hold, and it's going to keep going like this until it reaches the Supreme Court, as we're seeing with just about everything else these days. But also these cases will put the recent Supreme Court ruling to the test. Because remember, judges can't do nationwide injunctions anymore for the most part. But importantly, it also brought up the issue of state rights and the boundaries of states. Can, for example, one state make a ruling that affects all the other 50 states? Can a state blocking the federal government from carrying out a policy affect the federal policy in the other 49 states? So, for example, if they blocked the Trump administration's enforcement of temporary or putting on hold temporary protection status for these Haitian, I guess they're technically immigrants, if they can block that being put on hold, does it only apply to the state where the judge resides and works, or does it affect all 50 states? Again, it brings up a question of jurisdiction. And, again, we'll have to see how that works because the Supreme Court just made the ruling on that, noting that, the 10th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution does establish that there are limits on the powers of state courts to affect the courts of other states. And so we're going to have to see how these cases work as they move forward. But this could also be a sign that other judges, well, they might continue blocking Donald Trump regardless of the Supreme Court decision. Something that's kind of to be expected. Because again, anytime the Supreme Court makes a new opinion or determination that acts as precedent, there are going to be judges who try to find exceptions to that. It's the way the court system works. Now, another topic, though, Senate Judiciary Committee, they've now released more details on the alleged Chinese Communist Party plot to interfere in the 2020 U.S. elections. I'll be talking more about this after a quick break.
All right, just to pause here for a super quick moment. You are, of course, watching Crossroads with Joshua Philipp. I'm just here to share a message about American Hartford Gold, my own personal gold and silver bullion dealer. Now, obviously, the recent tariffs have made the markets super turbulent and volatile. With every new piece of tariff news, the markets seem to either crash up or crash down. And of course, it's worth mentioning that these conditions don't only affect Wall Street. They affect all of us through our investments and our retirement accounts. That's why I'd like to introduce you to a company that I trust and I myself use to secure my own savings, American Hartford Gold. They specialize in helping Americans move our assets into something tangible, into something you can actually hold, which is physical gold and physical silver, two precious metals that act as a hedge against all those decisions being made in Washington, D.C. They have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. They have thousands of 5-star reviews, and they make the whole buying process super simple. Your metals can be shipped directly to your door, or you can transfer your current retirement account to a tax-advantaged gold IRA. And the best part is that right now, American Hartford Gold is offering an exclusive offer. When you call them today and you mention the name Joshua, you could receive up to $15,000 in free silver with your initial investment. Take advantage of their special offer. You can either just call them at 877-260-2764 or text Joshua to 65532. All their information will also be down in the description box below. And now, back to Crossroads.
Welcome back to Crossroads. Now, if you're just tuning in, don't forget to support us by hitting the like button and let me know what you think in the comments. Now, the Senate Judiciary Committee, they've now released more details on the alleged CCP plot to interfere in our elections. 2020, there was a big claim about this. The documents were hidden from the public. Now, this is about the documents that FBI Director Kash Patel gave to Congress, alleging that reports of a CCP plot to rig our elections were hidden from the public for some reason. And the Senate Judiciary Committee, they're now giving us details on what that plot actually entailed. They're actually showing us a bit of what it said. This is the official site of the Senate Judiciary Committee. It says this: Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Chuck Grassley, Republican from Iowa, today released internal Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, emails revealing the FBI suppressed intelligence of alleged Chinese interference in the 2020 election to insulate then FBI Director Christopher Wray from criticism after Wray provided inaccurate and contradictory testimony to Congress. Again, this is the statement from Congress. I'm sure Wray would contest that claim, but this is from Congress. And they add, quote, the FBI declassified and provided records, requested records to Grassley, Chuck Grassley, along with an accompanying cover letter after Grassley initially received some important information from whistleblower disclosures, meaning people were telling him, hey, this happened, you should look into it. He asked FBI Director Kash Patel for it. They gave it to him. It notes the FBI emails offer an inside look at the Bureau's decision to recall and suppress an intelligence information report, an IIR, from the FBI's Albany field office on September 25, 2020. It notes the IIR contained information from an FBI confidential human source, CHS, alleging the Chinese government, the CCP, was producing, quote, tens of thousands of fraudulent driver's licenses to manufacture mail-in votes for then presidential candidate Joe Biden in the 2020 election. The allegation essentially was that the Chinese Communist Party had a big plot. They were going to get a bunch of fake driver's licenses, mail them to Chinese agents in the U.S., and they would use those licenses to get fraudulent mail-in ballots and then illegally vote in the elections. That you would have a lot of fraud taking place through the use of these mail-in ballots. And interestingly, they actually intercepted a large shipment of driver's licenses, fraudulent, coming from China. And you would normally think, hey, does that not corroborate the claims from this source? They did not feel so, and they covered it up. Now it says here, according to the FBI, these allegations, despite showing initial signs of credibility, were allegedly never fully investigated due to the FBI's sudden and, quote, abnormal decision to halt the investigation and bury the IIR's existence, meaning they buried the existence of this source. I don't know what that means. And it says preventing any additional FBI field offices as well as other intelligence community elements from accessing or studying the document, meaning this was hidden from other offices, including, as we would assume, they were finding these shipments coming from China that would corroborate the evidence. It says the FBI's stated reason for doing so was because, quote, the reporting will contradict Director Wray's testimony, which is interesting, right? Now, we'll see where this all goes. Congress is currently looking into it, investigating it. And FBI Director Kash Patel said that they uncovered this document. They actually did find the FBI document on this. Does that mean they're also now interviewing the classified source who told them this? We don't know. All this is behind closed doors right now. It does seem to be the case this is being investigated at the very least, so we know that. Beyond that, we don't know. But in addition to this, something else came out. CIA Director John Ratcliffe, he has an interesting announcement. They're working to get rid of the, quote, weaponization of intelligence. And he said this on X. He says, POTUS, President Trump, has trusted me with helping to end weaponization of U.S. intelligence. It says today's report underscores that the 2016 Intelligence Community Assessment was conducted through an atypical and corrupt process under the politically charged environment of former Director Brennan and former FBI Director Comey. Now, it seems this is in response to new details that are also coming out, another whole thing. New details coming out on how the whole Trump-Russia narrative was concocted and formed and spread throughout the government and then disseminated to the media and then was used to try to impeach the President of the United States at the time. Was that a palace coup? Was that a coup d'etat, trying to use the impeachment process to, kill Caesar? Or was that just bad intelligence? Was it, again, the actual special counsel investigation basically said it was an issue of confirmation bias. Individuals wanted so badly for it to be true, and they heard so many things along the sidelines that they basically said it was true or believed it regardless of the evidence in front of them. Now remember, there was a whole assessment that claimed that Russia was interfering with the election at the time. Alongside the Steele dossier, which was the basis of the entire thing, there was also an investigation through the federal agencies, the intelligence community. Did Russia breach the election? And part of that was about the assessment of, did Russia hack the servers of Hillary Clinton and the DNC and so on? And then the allegation was they leaked some of that to whistleblower organizations like WikiLeaks. And then, of course, that was used to, basically rig the campaign. That was the allegation. I remember at the time actually reading the assessment of the cyber breach, and it was very strange. I had never, at the time I was covering a lot of cybersecurity news, I had never personally seen a cyber attack assessment done like this. It was very strange. The actual assessment on whether a cyber attack took place that breached the servers and stole the emails and then gave them to WikiLeaks, it basically did this. All right, let me explain how a normal cyber assessment works if there's a breach. Normally what happens is this. They come out and they say, there was a cyber attack, it was being run by this APT, Advanced Persistent Threat Group, which could mean a foreign government. They will make that assessment, and they'll go over the basic assessment. Then they'll give a technical breakdown of how the actual breach happened. They'll show the actual attack methods, how they did the whole thing, the methods that were used, everything, right? It'll break down the entire attack, and then it'll go into the conclusion. This one was different. This one had the first part, the assessment that a breach took place, and it had the third part, the conclusion. But the middle part where they actually broke down the attack was not there. Instead, what they did is they had a whole part explaining how cyber attacks work. It did not talk about how this cyber attack worked. It just talked about how they work in general. It was the only document of that type I had ever seen covering these types of attacks, which set off some alarms for me and made me investigate it, which is why we wrote several articles about it at the time. But back to this, of course, that narrative, the one that came out from this and the assessments based on that, that was used as part of the campaign to try to frame Donald Trump. That was the one that got them to spy on his campaign, to spy on the people around him, and then to try to prevent him first from becoming president, then to try to allege that he was working with Russia and a foreign government, and try to block his appointment as president, and then tried to, of course, impeach him, and was also used to impact the outcome of the midterm election, and was also used as part of the campaign leading up until the very end to the 2020 elections, where it finally died because of the special counsel report. But this tainted his entire first term in office. But look, this is leading them to now put more focus on less politically charged intel reports. What CIA Director John Ratcliffe is currently saying is that he believes that there has been a kind of weaponization of intelligence, that whether from inherent bias or from political bias. A person, what they would call in the special counsel report confirmation bias, that would taint the way that the documents are written or taint what they choose to include or not include. Now, the CIA actually had a document on this, and they said this. Earlier this year, CIA Director John Ratcliffe tasked agency career professionals with decades of experience to conduct a lessons learned review of the procedures and analytic tradecraft employed in the intelligence community assessment conducted shortly after the 2016 election. Meaning, of course, the one where Trump was framed as having worked with Russia. And they said this. Today, Director Ratcliffe declassified the results of this review. We're now able to look at it. And said the tradecraft review identified multiple procedural anomalies. Procedural anomalies. What does that mean? It means they deviated from the way they're supposed to do things. Take that as you will. And the preparation of the 2016 ICA, such as a compressed timeline, uneven access to compartmented information, marginalization of the National Intelligence Council, and excessive involvement of agency heads, meaning a lot of people were involved with this, and a lot of people were involved in some funny business on this. That's basically what they're saying here. And they note as well, the review notes that adhering to established analytic processes and rigorous tradecraft is essential to ensure credibility, objectivity, and accuracy of CIA analysis. What does that mean? It basically means that they're reviewing the way that the entire Trump-Russia scandal became a scandal, the way that the documents alleged something happened that we now know did not happen. I've seen different assessments on this report coming out. I'll tell you the Republican and the Democrat view of it. The Republican view, and even the more conservative side, one example, Rasmussen Reports came out. They're saying this represents a scandal bigger than Watergate, suggesting that key officials in 2016 basically worked together to try to prevent Donald Trump from becoming president and then tried to remove him from office by weaponizing their offices. That's the allegation from the Republican and conservative side. If you look at the Democrat side, it's very different. What they're basically saying is that this is the Trump administration making these assessments, and the Trump administration is trying to frame the previous administrations. And they're saying that Trump is basically doing what they're accused of doing by carrying out these types of things. So which side do you believe? Well, that's politics for you, right? You can choose for yourself. But on another topic, we'll see how this unfolds. On another topic, the U.S. State Department is also taking on a brand new image, and they just unveiled a new patriotic America First rebranding. America First State Department. Imagine that. A State Department engaging in diplomacy that values its own country. It's a new concept for America, not very new for other countries. But Fox News said this. The State Department is launching a new America First rebranding initiative to consolidate all the logos for its offices under a singular one depicting the American flag, an effort that aligns with the agency's massive overhaul plans. It notes that whereas separate logos existed previously for offices including embassies, bureaus, and programs under the U.S. Agency for International Development, the rebranding effort seeks to establish consistent branding across all these platforms to best reflect America's contributions abroad, according to a State Department official. In other words, these organizations represent the United States now, not representing whatever branch they are. And the idea is if you're in some other country and you're giving foreign aid and they see the agency, they might think, oh, it's this agency and this agency head, or what is this international organization? No more is that going to be the case. It's going to be the American flag. And they're like, oh, America is doing this for me. That's the idea. They say this, quote, the redesign is very simple, and that was to recenter and re-anchor the visual identity of American efforts overseas in the American flag. Darren Beatty, acting Undersecretary for Public Diplomacy at the State Department, told Fox News Digital on Tuesday. My personal take on this, this does not seem like just a cosmetic change. I don't think they're just doing this as like a rebranding, just as some kind of surface program. To me, this actually seems to represent the fundamental change that the State Department is actually going through as a whole. Because part of the criticism of U.S. foreign aid and other programs, if you listen to, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, what is he saying? He's saying that going forward, U.S. foreign aid needs to be done in such a way that actually is in the interest of the United States. And the allegation that's being brought out, look at the issues around USAID, for example, when they were sending money for all these different programs. As they've shown the public what the money was being spent on, a lot of Americans were concerned, I think, because of whether you believe it's because it was how it was framed or whether that was an actual representation of it. A lot of Americans might have questioned, what does this have to do with American foreign interest? Why were we giving money to that very strange program, like, transgender Sesame Street episodes and things like that? You know what I mean? It was things like that. They're questioning now why that was being done. And how does that advance the interests of the United States? What Marco Rubio is now saying is that spending through USAID, for example, with Rubio now being in charge of that, although they're kind of folding it now, he's saying going forward, the money we spend abroad, U.S. foreign aid, foreign spending, it needs to be things that advance the interests of the United States. And so I think the rebranding of this seems to be part of that broader shift. That's the way I see it, at least. Now, another topic, the Trump administration, they're floating the idea of criminal charges against journalists at CNN for some of the recent coverage. Mediate said this. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem said journalists at CNN may have committed prosecutable offenses by doing basic reporting, the way they frame it, right? And they said this. On Monday, CNN reported on an app that allows users to report sightings of Immigration Customs Enforcement, ICE, agents. And they note that since President Donald Trump took office, ICE has carried out scores of raids to search for undocumented immigrants. They mean illegal aliens. A lot of these people are actually documented, so it's not an accurate use of the term. And they note that in response, Joshua Aaron, a developer, created an app called ICE Block, which Trump fans are now downloading to create false reports to make illegal aliens vacate locations, by the way. So the intended use of the developer seems to be that people can use it like a Waze app, and instead of saying, hey, a police car is ahead, you're saying, hey, ICE is coming to your neighborhood. And what it means is that if you're an illegal immigrant and you're working in a building, you get this alert on your phone saying ICE is coming, right? And you hide somewhere or you try to escape. That's the intended use, it seems, but there are now people, call them trolls or whatever, who decided it would be funny to download it and make false reports and then watch people who are here illegally run and vacate locations. Now, it notes this on the report, though. In addition to publishing a straightforward news article about ICE Block on its website, CNN also reported on the app on air. They interviewed the developer. And the Trump administration brought up that may have been a violation of the law. They were alleging there's a difference between reporting, whether they called it either irresponsible reporting or political activism in disguise as reporting. Which do you decide it is? Suggesting that there may have been a bias where the journalists are alleged to have been in support of the use of this. And because of that, they're suggesting this may actually be a crime, that CNN, the journalists there, they're saying that they may have violated the law by promoting something that could lead to federal agents being harmed. If ICE agents go somewhere, people track them, and then somebody ambushes them or kills somebody, the journalists may be held responsible for that, is what they're suggesting. Now, I don't know if they're going to move forward with actual criminal charges. The Trump administration message right now is that they may have committed crimes by doing so. If you want to know my personal opinion, I'm not in favor of charging journalists for covering a topic. You can call me biased because I would be an aggrieved party if they wanted to come after me for reporting on a topic. But I'd say, look, it could be argued that they did promote an app that could endanger federal agents. I don't think that that is false. I think that's actually true. In my personal opinion, though, the pendulum can swing both ways. Meaning, right now it's CNN, tomorrow it could be Fox News, just the way this goes politically, right? Because remember what happened during the previous administration. A similar narrative was being used against people accused of spreading COVID disinformation or vaccine conspiracies. And journalists were being censored, journalists were being attacked, outspoken voices were being deplatformed, monitored, labeled, you name it, right? Meaning that people were being accused of the same thing just on the other side of the aisle not too long ago. And they were accused of putting people's lives at risk because they say if you make people not believe in the effectiveness of these treatments, you're killing people. That was the allegation. Is that a crime? It's very similar to what CNN is facing right now in terms of the allegations against them. Now, remember that narrative at the time was used to censor people, to make lists of people, and to go after people. And now I know this is not exactly the same thing, right? When it comes to this ICE app putting officers' lives at risk, that is another issue entirely. But if the app in question actually does represent a threat to violence, in my personal opinion, well, step one would be making Apple pull it from the App Store. I think that should be step one if it is an app being used to facilitate the carrying out of crimes. But again, we haven't seen actions on that. Just on the point of news coverage, though, this also highlights something else, I'd say, which is the question of activist journalism. Journalists using their jobs to become political activists or activists for a different issue. You could argue that everybody has their biases, everybody cares about certain policies, everybody has something they care about. And normally, the people who want to report on things do it because they care about that topic. But if that's done in a way that endangers people or is used to trigger violence, that's an interesting topic. Because, at what point does it cross the line of activist journalism turning into illegal content? It's an interesting question to raise, actually, and maybe that does need to be brought up. I know the Trump administration, they're very against a lot of the big corporate media. Trump has repeatedly called them the enemies of the people. And I think we've seen similar things on the other side of the aisle during the previous administration, where just about every single conservative news outlet was facing some type of legal investigation or criminal charge. Epoch Times was targeted, Steve Bannon was targeted, OANN was targeted. Just about all the major conservative news outlets were targeted under the previous administration for different things. Was that done through, again, political bias and political targeting? Was that done intentionally? Or was it just a coinkydink? You decide. On another topic, though, the tariffs are yet again looming over all the international trading partners like a giant tidal wave cloud looming over the coast. The deadline Donald Trump set, which is going to put all the tariffs on hold, at least for now, that deadline ends next week. Time's up, buddies. And Donald Trump is planning on acting on this, and he's sending letters to trading partners telling them incoming tariffs, according to comments he made on Fox's Sunday Morning Futures on June 29th. Watch this.
It's so simple. We're sending letters out. I'd rather do it now. My guys, hey, I have great guys, Scott, Howard, other people, Jameson. They're talking to all these countries. We made a deal pretty much with India. We made a deal with China. We made a deal with UK, great people. We made deals. But I'd rather just send them a letter, a very fair letter saying, congratulations, we're going to allow you to trade in the United States of America. You're going to pay a 25% tariff or 20% or 40 or 50%. I would rather do that. And what I will do just sometime prior to the 9th is we'll send a letter to all these countries. There's 200 countries. You can't talk to all of them, no matter how many people you have. You can't talk to all of them. We'll send a letter and we'll say we would consider it a great honor, and this is what you'll have to do to shop in the United States. We're like a department store to shop in the United States, and you'll pay a 25% tariff. And we wish you a lot of luck, and that's the end of the trade deal. Because
We're going to have to wait and see what this means for all the different trade deals, because Trump hasn't really finalized deals with most countries as of now. A lot of these are still pending. And if the tariffs were put on hold for the sake of allowing these negotiations to happen, we would assume that either he's going to extend the tariffs or, maybe put them on them. We'll have to see. We could see Trump bring back higher tariffs on countries that had them previously, or at least as of now, on hold. And one interesting point that is coming up is that the fears that tariffs would cause spikes in prices. How many of you remember hearing this? Trump's tariffs are going to make the food in your store cost so much money you will not be able to afford groceries. Retailers preparing for the tariffs. This is the market apocalypse, which is now upon us. The 2012 the calendar, Mayan calendar, should have warned us about the 2025 tariffs looming over all of our markets. It turns out that did not happen. It did not happen. In fact, a lot of big corporate media, they've had to acknowledge this. Turns out the tariffs did not cause prices to go up for the most part. In some areas they did, but for the most part they have not. And so it is interesting to watch this so far. That being said, that's based on the lower end of the tariffs. Trump did put most of them relatively on hold, like 10%. It's still a lot, but not as much as like 90% as some countries are facing. And so we will see what happens if he does increase the tariffs next week. So we'll wait and see. All right, everyone, that said, questions, comments, anything you'd like to say, let's jump into a discussion. So leave any questions, comments in the chat. Let's jump into it. Kenneth Harris, you're saying, that has been the trouble all along. Crimes never charged like they should be. Yeah, well, you know what happens when you don't enforce the law in one regard? A couple things happen. One is you risk the line of preferential treatment. Like, for example, if you or I were to steal somebody's identity and then masquerade as them while, getting a fake job, you or I would probably go to prison for that. I can almost guarantee. All right, you tell me, if you stole somebody's identity and then used that identity to get a job somewhere so you could, use their identity to you have to think that that's not even just identity theft, that's also forgery, that's impersonation. That would even be committing crimes if you file financial reports, like to the IRS, using a stolen identity. You would probably get hit with multiple crimes. You would not be charged with just one. I can almost guarantee that you would not be charged with just one crime. They'd hit you with a whole bunch of them. Do you think you'd go to prison for that? You tell me. So the question is, why would the law be enforced against you, but not against the large number of people who do this on a regular basis? Because it's a very common thing for illegal immigrants to do. I know it's not across the board, but I know for a fact in New York City, a lot of the construction work jobs, because I've talked to people there. I've been a reporter since 2006. I've interviewed a lot of people. I know that a lot of the construction jobs, and especially like union jobs, if they hire illegal aliens, they tell them, go to this location and get a social security number. And they have locations, not run by the unions, but locations that are known where you can go and get stolen IDs and stolen social security numbers. And then you go back to the workplace and okay, this is my number. And even though they told the person to go commit a crime, it's accepted. And this is the way it's been done for a long time. This is the way things are done. And it's been allowed to happen. You don't really see people charged for this. It's a crime that has been relatively tolerated. And should that be the case? You do risk the issue of having a two-tiered justice system in that regard. It does bring up the issue of if you're ever charged with a crime like that, which it's not a good idea. I urge you to not do it. But if you ever decide that you want to do that and you get charged with a crime, you could say, look, historical precedents, you let these people violate this law, but you're going after me? What the heck? That could be an argument in court. I don't know if it would hold up, but I think it'd be a fair argument. That's one issue you get, right? The two-tiered system of justice. You have one group of people allowed to violate a law and another group of people who would be probably thrown in the gulag for it. You'd probably go to jail for a long time for doing that, right? The other side is this. Once you start allowing people to violate one law, if you let people violate a law, you will harm other people by extension. You're going to have victims. Bukele came out with an interesting quote recently, and he said that policies that protect the wolf harm the sheep. And you can save the wolf by sacrificing the sheep, suggesting that there's no such thing as a victimless crime. If it is a victimless crime, it's not a crime, right? You need to have someone who's aggrieved. You need to have somebody who's been impacted by it. Otherwise, we normally don't treat it like it's a crime, right? And so you do have people who are having their identities stolen. You do have people who are facing a lot of problems because this has been allowed. That is happening. And then you start having the tentacles of one violation leading to many, which is you have criminal organizations that have built large businesses off stealing people's identities and selling them. And those criminal enterprises, if they want to grow their business, they have two options. They either increase the frequency of their crimes or they get involved in other crimes. And if that's tolerated, you then allow for large-scale violation of the law. And if that's tolerated, then you start having other problems where you have human trafficking and sex trafficking and gangs and then turf wars, which are happening as well. In fact, the federal government, they actually just arrested several people involved in a gang turf war between Tren de Aragua and a rival gang. That's what you have. And so you start creating, once you start allowing this stuff, you start creating a criminal underworld that is allowed to operate to an extent. And so you end up creating a lot of other problems by extension of it. That's the issue in my take, right? Judy Akeem, you're saying, the problem with the whole intent question is that it presupposes a person with a capacity for individual thought. If you're part of a psychological mass, you don't think as an individual. That shouldn't protect you from being held accountable. Yeah. You're talking about intent to violate the law. And that is a big thing that is taken into account. Two things are often taken into account if somebody violates the law. One is, did you do it knowingly, right? Did you know you were violating the law? Roll down your window. Do you know how fast you were driving? Which, by the way, if a police officer asks you that, I think in my personal experience, you're more likely to get let off with a warning if you're honest with them, because they know how fast you were driving. You're not going to fool them. They have equipment for it. So you're better off being honest in that case. But on that point, you could say it's did you know you were? It's basically saying, did you know you were violating the law? And if you say yes, I know I was violating the law, they're like, okay, you make my life easier. Don't let it happen again. Because once you admit I knew I was doing this, then basically you're admitting guilt, and that's when you can be charged with a crime, right? Or that's when you don't get a court process anymore. This is why when you plead guilty or not guilty, right? Guilty or not, how do you plead? Guilty, not guilty. Well, if you said, I know I violated the law, that means you're pleading guilty. That's how it works. And so even during the trial, if you get charged with a crime, they will want to see, did you know you were violating the law? Did you accidentally do this? Did you stumble across it? You could still maybe be charged with negligence, even if you did not know you were committing a crime, depending on the nature of it. or depending on how people were impacted. But again, that is something taken into consideration. But as Judy Akim is noting, the other part is intent. Did you intend harm? Did you mean to, was it aggravated identity theft, or was it just identity theft, right? That's the difference. And if the intent was to cause harm, it's a lot more serious. The issue you do have is when there's a tolerated crime and you're basically allowed to do it. Officer, I was not speeding. I was just keeping up with the flow of traffic, right? I was just keeping up with the flow of traffic. It was not my intent to violate the law. I just thought that's what you should do, right? I didn't want to endanger people. That does, in fact, play into how things are weighed, but it does not mean that the law doesn't exist. And so, in my personal take, they might be, in terms of the judge, they might face like a lower sentence if they didn't mean to do it, but the law still stands one way or the other. Idaho Rocks, you're saying, the fact that the State Department has to rebrand itself to be America First is too sad. I didn't think of it like that, but that is kind of sad. They've also made it so that only the American flag can be shown at government buildings, like federal government buildings, because imagine like the U.S. State Department is active in like Dubai and they have the trans flag outside or something like that. Like, fine. Look, I don't care how a person chooses to live their life. I really don't care. I have my values. I'm totally okay with other people having their values. I don't care. But I do care when they try to force it on me or other people. But aside from that, I really don't care. But the issue you have when you have a federal government building displaying something else is you have to think of the perception you're creating of yourself, right? If you go to another country and you act like a jerk, people will probably not respect you. They might have a bad impression of you. If you go to Europe and you act like the stereotype of the loud American and you're shouting to your friend across the street, which they don't really do there, you might give them a bad impression of Americans. I know a Canadian who was hanging out with other Canadians in Japan and was being very drunk and rowdy and loud in a Japanese location, to the extent that these Canadians, not Americans, Canadians, had a Japanese individual come and yell at them and say, "This is why nobody respects Americans," because they thought the Canadians were Americans. So the Canadians made Americans look bad in Japan in that case. And my Canadian friend told me they didn't tell the Japanese they weren't Americans. But my point with this is, different countries have different cultures. And even when you're helping people, you need to think of the image you're presenting. And that goes to the purpose of what the State Department does, right? It's about foreign relations. If you're a department and your goal and your job is foreign relations, you probably want to have good relations. You probably want people to perceive you well. And so when you go there, you want to make sure that you're not doing things that will have the opposite effect. And so I do think it's good the State Department is doing this, that they are presenting a more polished view of the United States, and that they're showing, basically that, hey, don't forget, America did you this favor. This is the American flag. You know what I mean? We represent the United States. I think it's a good thing, personally. Ashley from California, you're saying, instead of rebranding the State Department, can we get those USAID cuts Doge recommended? Poor Elon Musk. He put in so much work. They slept in the office. They brought in like special, special mattresses that make you so you don't have to sleep as much or something like that. Like, I never heard of that before. Elon Musk was working overtime. He had his whole team. He had big balls with him. He found him, got him, and they were like going at it, just cutting spending left, right, and center. And then what happens? They identify all these cuts, and then they get rid of the spending limits, and they want to spend more money, not less money. So poor Elon Musk, right? But it is true. It is true that Elon Musk and the Doge department, they recommended a lot of cuts to USAID. And we'll see how that goes. Actually, I mean, on the point of USAID, they're actually talking about folding it entirely right now. So in that one case, maybe the legacy of Musk stands on cutting government spending. I shouldn't exaggerate. A lot of their recommended cuts across agencies have in fact been enacted. They actually did cut a lot. The problem they ran into with that is that, and Trump, as you would expect, is being blocked on this, but if the government, if Congress allocates budgets, right? So the budget is allocated by Congress. If a government agency gets a certain amount of money, it's the way the law works. It wasn't always this way, but it's the way it is now. They actually have to spend the money. They can't just not spend it. So it's a bit weird, right? And so what will happen is if they find a way to spend less money, they have to still spend the money that's there. And you could argue a few things with this. You could argue that it means that if they had to, the money will be allocated on the premise of certain programs and things they're supposed to buy. And so you could assume that if the money is allocated and they don't spend it, then it means that they decided to not do something, or they decided to renegotiate the price of something or whatever else. That's one side you could argue with it. But on the other side is I'd say the Doge department, they'd probably argue that it necessitates unnecessary spending. And it also, I think from Trump's side, it requires them to spend money even if the negotiation of price was not a very good deal. And this is one of the things that people criticize of, being a reason why, if you or I go buy a can of beans from the supermarket, maybe you pay, I don't know, like $1.25. Whereas if the military buys a can of beans in bulk, they might pay like $2 or $3. I'm giving a hypothetical, not a direct example. But it is one of the arguments that for some reason they spend more money for things that you or I could buy. And you would think that normally if you're buying bulk, you'd pay less, not more. It doesn't make sense, right? And so when it comes to the cuts Doge recommended, the cuts have to be embedded in congressional allocation of funds if you're going to actually cut spending. And I think that's why Elon Musk is not happy right now with the big, beautiful bill, is because they're not instituting the cuts of spending in the actual spending bill. You could argue then at the very most, they've identified waste and unnecessary spending, but they're not cutting spending. And that's where things are at with it. California gal, you're saying, all goes to show how extremely difficult it is to cut spending, evidently. Indeed. It's easy to create something. It's very difficult to undo the thing you create. And countries experience this anytime there's a declaration of an emergency. Sure would be nice if we got rid of the tax system that was temporarily created for the Civil War, right? Civil War's been over for a while. Can we get rid of the tax thing that you did with the Civil War? No? Okay. What about the changes to like emergency laws that were created, for World War II? That was interesting. No, you want to keep those? It was more like Britain. No. Oh, okay, I guess we're stuck with them forever. What about the war on terror? That Patriot Act is, maybe we don't need it anymore. No, you're going to keep those powers forever? Okay. What about the additional congressional spending for the COVID emergency? You know, you kind of started spending a lot more money than you used to for COVID. No, you're not going to change it back? Okay, here we are. I'm half joking, but it is true. When they create additional powers, it's very hard for them to take that ring and throw it in the fire. You know what I mean? People might argue they don't like it, but as soon as they hold that ring in their hand, they don't necessarily want to destroy it. And I think that's why Elon Musk is kind of unhappy right now on that point. And you know, we talked yesterday about the different arguments with with the big beautiful bill. Maybe you do need to spend more to get yourself, to kind of rebuild, to bring back manufacturing. I think that's the other argument for it. But it is a standing issue, though. Seymour Butt's question is saying China doesn't have elections, do they? They kind of do, but they technically don't. They have elections like North Korea might have elections. Do you ever see when they vote on things in North Korea? Where, all right, it's kind of funny. Go and watch some videos of it. Kim Jong-un, does everybody support this? Raise your hand. Kim Jong-un raises his hand, and everybody's like as quick as they can. Yes, I support this. Please don't kill me and my family. You know what I mean? It's one of those types of things. That being said, in China, you have a lot of internal fighting, though. You do have some of these countries where they call themselves you have the democratic country, and then you have the democratic people's version of the country, meaning you have the free one, and then you have the communist one, right? There's the Democratic Republic and the Democratic People's Republic. And you could argue the Democratic People's Republic still has elections, but do they really? So look, in China, if you're a normal citizen, you don't really vote on things. Or if you do vote, it's like, do you want this Communist Party representative, or do you want this Communist Party representative? It's a one-party dictatorship, is the way it works. Would you rather have the blue poison or the white poison? Which do you choose? Pick your poison. It's one of those types of things. All right, folks, that said, happy 4th of July. I hope you all have a good weekend planned ahead. I'm going to go hang out with my dad. So we have a big barbecue planned tomorrow with some family friends. I hope you all enjoy the weekend. Get out, do something fun, celebrate America, blow up a small chunk of it in a safe manner if you choose to do so using fireworks. But enjoy your weekend, enjoy some time off. And that said, I will see you again. Actually, tomorrow, although I encourage you to spend time with your family, then watch the show. But again, we have prime time. If you haven't watched it yet, it's an NTD program, but I'm on it. Roman Balmakov is on it as Facts Matter. And then it's some NTD teams, Tiffany Meyer. We're bringing some new folks on, like Shelby. She's working on some awesome stuff right now. Be sure to check out Primetime. I think you'll really like it if you haven't seen it yet. It's a little more like we have fun. We have fun making it. If you watch us between segments and we're chatting, it's because we're talking during the entire break. We have a lot of fun making that show. So check it out tomorrow. That'll be 8 p.m. Eastern Time. And I will see you again on Monday. Enjoy your weekend. Enjoy the 4th of July. Happy 4th of July. Happy Independence Day. And as always, please take care of yourselves, stay informed, and stay free. Thank you.